welcome to Today in Woburn. We have an excellent show today. Our Mayor Scott Galvin is preparing for the State of the City address, but we have two fabulous guests who are stepping in today and are going to give us a lot of great information. We've got Representative Rich Haggerty, and we're going to talk a lot about vaccine distribution, so I'm really excited that Rich is here to chat with us about that. I know there's tons and tons of questions. And then the founder of Social Capital Inc., David Crowley, is with us today, and there's some really excellent programming happening to support our community. And so we're going to be digging in on both of those topics. Thank you both for joining us. Rich, let's start with you today. Things I'm sure are off to a busy start as we go into the new year. There's so much going on, and I'm sure you're super busy. I appreciate you taking time to chat with us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here, Sam. It certainly is busy, and it's great to start 2021, get 2020 behind us, and move on to bigger and better things, hopefully for all of us, and get past hopefully COVID this year, and start anew.
Yeah, I think that's going to be welcome for so many of us. Let's talk a little bit about vaccination. So we are fortunate to be able to see and read and learn from what's happening all around us across the country and across the world, actually, in terms of vaccine distribution. And one of the things I've been reading a lot about what's happening in Connecticut and New York, because they're our neighbors and many of us have friends and family in those areas. They seem a little ahead of us in terms of, and when I say us, I mean Massachusetts, not Woburn specifically, but ahead of Massachusetts in terms of having sort of a central registration system for vaccine distribution and such. And I just wanted to kind of get a sense of where are we really at in Massachusetts?
Sure. So, I mean, just big picture, we're working towards getting, of course, phase one vaccinated. I mean, that's really where the effort has been made. Our of course, healthcare professionals, folks in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and of course, our first responders, make up a big chunk of that first phase one, roughly 650,000, 660,000 people who are part of that group who really need to be vaccinated first. And, some other states haven't taken exactly the same approach we have. We've made a decision, the Baker administration has made the decision to vaccinate these folks first and to make sure that we have enough vaccines on hand to take care of those people. Some other states, I think, have been a little bit more open with regards to who they're allowing to have vaccines, and whether or not that's the right approach or not, I guess is up to other folks to decide. But in my view, I think making sure that our healthcare professionals who are obviously in the front lines every single day, making sure that our first responders who are on the front lines every single day, and of course, making sure that folks in assisted living facilities, senior living facilities get their vaccines first, because again, these are the folks who are getting impacted the most. The senior folks in the assisted living facilities we saw disproportionately impacted, and we had so many, deaths in these facilities. So we're trying to address that in a really responsible manner, and I think we're doing the right thing. So that's our effort right now. The biggest challenge we're facing is really getting the vaccines. The production issues are substantial, I think, and I think you're going to hear more about that in the next few weeks and months, because we have to get more vaccines into our state in order to get people vaccinated.
So let's talk a little bit about that, Rich. I think most of us understand the realities of we're producing and moving and trying to get everything up very fast. And that's complicated in anywhere in the world, but it's very complicated in the United States because of the way our government system works, the size of our country, the way we have individual states. How does Massachusetts get vaccines today?
Yeah, so we're getting them directly, obviously, from the federal government through the two main, supply chains right now, which is the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. We're hopeful that in the coming week or so, we're going to get good news out of J&J, who are going to introduce a third vaccine, which would be a single-dose vaccine. People seem to be positive on that. Time will tell when the results are finally released, but a single vaccine versus a double dose requirement would be a game changer with regards to how quickly we can get people vaccinated. But right now we're getting, or I should say not right now, but up until last week, we were getting around 83,000 vaccines per doses per week. And last week we saw a dip in that on both the Moderna and the Pfizer side. Why that happened has not been explained to me yet. But we're talking about 350,000 doses right now, I think, that were delivered to the Commonwealth. We've inoculated, I think, about 200 or used about 250 of those at this point. But we've got to get those numbers up. We have to get to a range where we're receiving weekly, probably 200 to 225,000 a week, to really get us in a good spot as we head towards the summer. I think that's by the time I think most people feel like we're going to have a good chunk of the population vaccinated.
Now, how does that work? Did we say, go to the state, say, here's how many people in phase 1 we need vaccines for, and they give us distribution, or does the federal government say, Massachusetts, here's what you're getting, make the most of it?
Yeah, I think they basically said that. They basically said, here's the number you're going to get. Although they've been somewhat vague, I think there's been a failure of communication from the federal government thus far in this regard. The expectations game has not been played well from the federal government. Now, whether that's on the production folks' side or whether that's within the government, I'm not sure. But I can tell you, we haven't been very clear on how many vaccines we're even going to get each week right now. And that's something that's got to change. I think there's been some frustration within the state government in that regard. But we're hopeful, I think, that in the coming weeks, we're going to start to get a better handle on how quickly the production is really going to, finally get into the hands of folks. We'll be able to get these vaccines in the hands of folks. But, it's only been a month since we got our first vaccines. We got our first vaccines, I think, the second week of December, something like that. So we're hopeful that the things.
And I know we did some in Woburn. We did first respond. We did some portions of our first responders. I don't know if that included everyone. I know there's been some discussion about where do teachers fall? Do teachers fall in phase 2?
Yeah, phase 2.
So in this next phase, which has a lot. I mean, so from reading the news, it feels a little bit like we all want it, we all need it, and every week it seems to be somebody new is added to phase 2. And I imagine there's some lobbying happening and teachers should get it and pretty much everybody on it should get it, right? So this has to be, my point is, this is hard because there is good reasons for every group of it across the board for the most part to be getting this vaccine. How is the balancing act and the decision making being right now in terms of making decisions about who's in phase 2 and who's in phase 3?
Yeah, I think that it's been a bit of a moving target, right? I mean, as we've built this out, I think there's been a lot of advocacy done and lobbying done, certainly, as you alluded to move certain groups kind of up in the order, and rightly so. As an example, funeral directors and folks who work in funeral homes. You wouldn't necessarily think of them off the top of your head, but these are folks who are in and out of hospice facilities on a daily basis and in and out of medical care facilities on a daily basis. And they are, again, on the front line. So we move them up. Another group I think that we moved up was or expanded upon was some folks in the dental world, not just dentists, but actual folks, periodontists and other folks who are doing different work in the dental community. We also saw us make a move on what types of teachers are going to be vaccinated because we realized that we have some teachers who are dealing in I'll use the word typical classroom, and other folks who are dealing in perhaps special education and working with everything from toileting students to students who aren't able to wear masks, all of these different types of things that these special education teachers are dealing with. So moving those folks into an earlier round, I think, was the right approach. And we've tried to understand that, hey, look, when you put together a plan, it's okay to change it. It's okay to make it better as you move along here. We're learning. I think the administration has largely done a pretty good job. It's really the getting viruses in our hands is the challenge right now, not necessarily.
I mean, I know you mean vaccine, not viruses, but just for those who are
sorry, vaccine. Yeah, excuse me.
Right, sure. So phase 2, so phase 1 to me had a whole lot of complications around it, but in terms of actual distribution, it was relatively easy because they were done through, city employees, first responders, the medical care facilities. As we start to look at people with certain medical conditions or people who have an expanded set of jobs, how will we validate that person is in that phase, and how will that actually be distributed? Is it going to be done through like our Board of Health or through a central state location? How will that be?
Sure, I think there's a few different things. So we're definitely going to have mass vaccination sites. Just released that Fenway will open as a second mass vaccination site February 1st. Of course, we have Gillette being another location. I anticipate that you're going to hear of another North Shore location, 15, 20 minutes from here. That'll be another mass vaccination site. And then a couple more as well. So we could be in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 mass vaccination sites stood up sometime in the next 30 days. They're going to ramp up from about 500 appointments right now per day being done at Gillette up to hopefully 5,000 at each location. So you do the math out at 6 locations at about 5,000 people per day. You're going to be in the neighborhood of what's that,
30,000 a day,
about 225,000 vaccinations per week being done.
Which is what we are hoping to start getting to.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, how will appointments be made for that? We have seen some centralized systems, like I said, I think in Connecticut, New York, probably other places. We've seen some what I would consider horror stories in Florida, where you've got people first come, first serve, our most vulnerable population stand outside in a line with a bunch of other vulnerable people and wait and hope you get it today. I'm hoping we're not taking that approach, but where do we anticipate being?
Yeah, so CIC is leading up the effort right now at Gillette. And I think you're going to see that expanded upon. We may make other partnerships as well in the state. Some of our pharmacies, particularly CVS and Walgreens, may stand up their own programs from a technology standpoint of view, but you will have to sign up for a date, time, and location online in order to go to these facilities to get vaccinated. And
will you need a doctor's order or an employment order, or we honor system? Like, how will we actually decide who's in phase 2?
Yeah, I think we're still working through that right now. I mean, The obvious is, you're going to see municipalities play a lead in some of this. I can think of municipalities playing a lead specifically in vaccinating, K through 12 workers and them being able to kind of handle who that is, who's getting that. And the 75 plus category, who's also in phase 2, is obviously pretty easy to do. 2+ comorbidities is a little more challenging as to how you make that determination. And I think they're working through how exactly folks are going to do that. You're going to hear more about that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I appreciate you giving us an update as that comes through. I don't think there's any magic answer. What I do know is that we have a very fractured healthcare system, and a lot of people have different doctors, have different viewpoints. And I went in, for example, I went to see my Leahy record because I see a pulmonologist and I have asthma, and I was curious how all that stuff, and they have half of my stuff in there, right? And I know that's the case for lots of folks. I also know there's lots of people who don't have doctors. There's lots of people who have transportation concerns. So I'm assuming those are all things that the state legislature and the Baker administration are trying to think through how we can make sure I can hop in my car and I can get to Gillette or Fenway or wherever I need to go. That's not the case for a lot of our probably most vulnerable population.
Absolutely. No, transportation is a big issue. And certainly, the ride, and I think you're going to see, local municipalities play a role in getting some folks from their homes to local senior centers and whatnot in order to get the vaccination. You're going to see some local facilities stood up for, certainly a segment of the population. I don't think you're going to see perhaps the general population getting vaccinated, maybe, the Woburn Senior Center. But 75 plus, I could envision a situation where you would see that in order to make it more accessible for folks right around the corner from their homes to make sure that they have somewhat easy access. I spoke to my aunt yesterday in Long Island, and my uncle is legally blind. And, there was a serious discussion with her about, hey, look, how do I get this done? Where do you go? She can't bring him to a mass vaccination site. It just doesn't work. From an age perspective, from a disability perspective. So that, people are thinking about that. And I think making sure that it's happening in their own municipalities, at a local senior center, at a local CVS and or Walgreens would make it a lot easier for these folks.
Excellent. Well, I'm really glad that you guys are thinking through all this, because these are complex things and we want to get as many people vaccinated as possible. One last question for you. As we look at there is a lot of information about vaccines that are available, and it's very clear that people are recommending them, and we're giving them to first responders and healthcare workers and all of that. But there's a lot of misinformation, or people are uncertain about the vaccine. Will the state be doing any kind of education campaign or any other sort of communication outreach to make sure that those who can get it are comfortable getting the vaccine?
Yeah, as I said, I did speak to Secretary Sutters I think it was last Tuesday or Wednesday, and she told me they are going to be getting a statewide marketing campaign around the vaccination program. not just to let folks know where it is and when it is, but also to let folks know that it's safe and reliable, and that we're going to make sure people are comfortable with it. You're always going to have a percentage of the population, 5 or 10%, who perhaps are anti-vaxxers for whatever reason, but we're also going to have, I think, a large push from the state to say, hey, look, this is safe and reliable, and we need to do this in order to get beyond COVID and get back to a sense of normal life for all of us.
Well, I'm looking forward to the day that I've got my long list of places I'm going to go hang out at when it feels safe to do that. So, plus I've got a lot of gift cards I've been buying to help support businesses that I need. I need an excuse to go use now. So,
me too.
Right. So that's great. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. And as this evolves, I know you're always very accessible to us and continue to keep us informed. Anything else that you'd like to give an update on before we wrap up with you today?
No, I think that's great. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich. I'm going to invite David Crowley to join us now. Dave is the founder of Social Capital Inc. And David and I have been chatting, and he's been doing some really good work. We recognize that there's a whole bunch of things around the vaccine and testing and things that the city is doing, but these are also very stressful times for lots of families who are trying to balance weird schedules, unemployment, partial homeschooling or full-time remote schooling, and ill relatives and quarantines, and we could keep going on, but I'll start to be depressed, and I don't want to do that to anybody on the show. But I do, David, want to invite you to talk a little bit about some of the parent resource programming that you have going on, because I think it's really valuable and important for people to know what's out there that can maybe help them through these challenging times.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Samantha. Thanks for inviting me on to talk about it. Yes, it was kind of interesting the way this came about, because we were starting to plan this idea of a parent network before the pandemic hit us. Several of us, including one of my colleagues, Phil Gordon, as well as Adriana Mendes Sheldon from the school system, were going to a program on youth mental health. And we came up with the idea, again, pre-pandemic, that if you want to help young people, thrive, you also have to pay attention to parents. That obviously, as we both know as parents, the critical role we play, and thought there was a little gap to fill in terms of providing support for parents. Lo and behold, parenting is a tough enough job in normal times, and as we know, a lot of new wrinkles were thrown our way as far as just how to support our kids. And so it was, I suppose, good timing that we're starting to lay the groundwork for putting in place a program to support parents. So we created something called the Woburn Parent Network that we launched last spring. We quickly figured that it was still valuable to offer such a thing. We just needed to, instead of having presentations, at the high school auditorium, it was going to be Zoom like this. And so we started with programs that were more based on bringing in some experts, psychologists, counselors, and just people that had some expertise in how to structure your day for your kids, to offer programs that were sort of more presentation oriented. And most of those are actually still available for viewing on our website at seiwoburn.org/WPN. So some of those presentations are available for people to check out, some good stuff that I think people would find useful. But then really the vision for this organization or this program was really about parents talking to parents, sharing information. Obviously, we get great information, a lot of information this year from the schools on a regular basis, but it's a little different to have conversations kind of informally with other parents, understanding, maybe I'm not the only one that's dealing with this kind of challenge supporting my child, whether it's the academic side of, virtual learning or the emotional side, because we know this is stressful for anyone, but I think there's a lot of data out there that says it's particularly true stressful for youth at a time, when you're growing and changing so much, as whether you're a teenager or a younger kid, that you really miss the socialization that you get from being at school and on teams and in clubs and stuff like that. So that's really the idea of the parent network, is offering programs. And so we are now offering regular monthly. It'll be generally the third Wednesday of the month. So there's one, we're taping this on a Tuesday evening. So there's one Wednesday, the 20th at 6:00. And then we'll be repeating that on a monthly basis.
That's great. I'm so glad that we have that resource. And it is hard. I was talking with someone the other day, and whose nephew had a baby. And that baby was now, 9 or 10 months old and really had not met anybody, right? They had a couple of people that had gone into isolation, but really the baby didn't go anywhere. The baby hadn't met it. So I'm sure this generation of children will adjust like all of our generations of children do. But the anxiety about what they were saying is that they've started to socialize with the baby a little bit more and been outside and done some things. The baby's very clingy. The baby's uncomfortable around new people, right? It's not something that they've gotten used to. So I think for all ages of children and all groups of people, these are anxiety driving, and I'm glad that we have this resource. I also wanted to ask you, I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot a little bit. I'd love to, so yesterday was Martin Luther King Day, and a day of service for many people, and really, which is what SCI is all about. And so I'm curious how you personally chose to honor the day and what you did.
Sure. Well, we were supporting a little bit. The St. John's Baptist Church has historically organized an in-person event. In fact, last year, Martin Luther King Day, spent enjoying some, chicken and all some traditional favorites that Dr. King himself might have enjoyed with friends from St. John's and other folks from the community. So that's what we did last year. This year is a virtual version of it. So I checked that out. And students from the Embrace group at the high school, I don't know if you've ever had them on by any chance.
I haven't, but that would be a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great program. And so there was actually a youth panel talking about a very diverse group of students from the high school who are involved in the Embrace program, talking about some of the ideas that Dr. King brought up and some of the current issues around racial justice. So it was very interesting. So I did that in the morning, and then SCI, as some people might know, serves other communities as well. And we have an AmeriCorps member who's based at UMass Dartmouth, and she was organizing a panel in the afternoon. So I was on Zoom a lot, basically, but it was a very good discussion. And actually my colleague, Phil Gordon, who's a Woburn native, was one of the panelists. So I was there to support him. So check that out. And then, so it was a good day, definitely.
I love it. I did some letter writing to folks who COVID patients and seniors who were covering, not people that I know personally, but there's a great little organization started by two young women who are students that have a group of seniors across the country that there's like 3 or 4 countries that they support. So I did a little bit of that. And I also did some newspaper subscriptions to support journalism and storytelling and all the things that are out there. So I saw beautiful tributes in all kinds of ways yesterday. And it was such a treat to do that and to see everybody participating. I know that you have some programming coming up around issues of racial justice and equality and inclusion and diversity in communities. Maybe just touch a little bit about what SCI is doing in that area as well.
Sure. Yeah, so there's one program that we're starting in February, which is of course Black History Month. So it's called not really learning about history, but it's called Disrupting Racism. And we're doing it in partnership with a group called the Network for Social Justice. They're based in Winchester, but serve the area. And so the idea of that program is really to try to get a diverse group of people together to have a safe space to talk about issues of race and racism. And one of the things I'm really excited about the program is that it definitely focuses a lot on, there's some theory and some bigger concepts, hopefully, for, people to get educated, but also a lot of things about like, what can you do in your daily life when you see something that's not quite right? I'm sure we've all been in moments when we're uncomfortable, somebody says something. Especially, I find personally, some things that are so obviously like, when you see the rebel flag in the Capitol, that's like so blatantly racist and bad. But I think there are a lot of things that are a little more subtle that we come across in our day-to-day life. And sometimes some of us, you might have a feeling inside like, gee, that's not quite right, but how do I address it? And so this program is that's one of the goals, is to help equip people with some ideas and suggestions of how can you respond and sort of take a stand, in different ways, whether it be, not necessarily just, it's going to a protest once in a while or that sort of thing, but what can you do in your daily life when you see something that's not quite right?
Well, that sounds like a really important conversations to have in a safe place for people to have open idea sharing and, and things. So thank you so much for hosting that. Thank you for being on Today in Woburn. Today, thank you all for joining us on the show. We talked a lot about some really serious things this week, actually. We talked about vaccine distribution. We talked about resources for parents, and we talked about some resources and programming that David and the SEI team are doing around diversity and inclusion, and how in our daily lives we can support all the members of our community from all different backgrounds and all different ways that they're working and living. Thank you as always for joining us. And as always, please continue to take good care of each other.